Then, please start moving the stuff out. Hold on a second. What do you mean? This is my house. It's only natural to come back here after finishing the last job site, right? I'll have your stuff moved to the storage unit nearby. I've paid for 3 months' rent, so once you find a place to move, you can move it out yourselves. As for you, I need you to leave the house now. You can go to a nearby hotel or back to your folks' place. There's no need to rush things like this. I want to take care of my new family. Pack up your things and get out fast. The husband had returned from his job transfer alone. But he didn't come back alone. He brought along his 23-year-old lover and their 5-year-old illegitimate child. He said that from now on, he would live with his new family, and that my daughter and I should leave immediately. As the movers mixed in, my daughter came out of the house and pulled at the hem of my shirt. Mom. Let's get out of here fast. It seems she didn't want to be near her father for even a second. Since the movers would take care of our belongings, I grabbed my purse in one hand and my daughter's hand in the other and left the house. Take care. Dad, this is the end of your life. What? The kid is acting tough. Thinking my daughter shouldn't say more, I quickly tugged her hand and signaled her to say no more. Until the very end, my ex-husband taunted me. Unable to bear his attitude, my daughter turned around and quietly taunted back. Angered by her words, my husband straightforwardly hurled abuse at her. There's no need to say such things to a 10-year-old. However, watching my husband abuse my daughter, it seemed her words didn't bother him. Turning my back on my ex-husband, I sighed with relief. What my daughter said was not just bravado. Perhaps my husband really is nearing the end of his life. He'll soon realize what preparations I've made for this moment. My name is Mary. I'm 38 years old and work part-time. My daughter, Anna, is 10 years old, and now it's just the two of us living together. Since my husband isn't often home, people sometimes mistake me for a single mom, but that's not the case. And it's not like we're having a rough patch and living separately. My husband, Ryan, works as a supervisor for a large construction company. He works at one site for several months to years, and once a job finishes, he moves on to the next. Because his job changes locations so often, we've had to move several times, even 3 times while our daughter was just in preschool. Each move seemed to make my daughter sad, and I felt like I had nails in my heart. This was just too sad for our daughter to keep up. It seems my husband thought so too, because he made a suggestion. Should we just buy a house? Huh? A house? From now on, I'll be the only one moving for jobs. You and Anna can settle down in one place. That way, Anna won't have to look so sad every time we move. You've had to quit jobs too because of all the moving, but if I'm the one relocating for work, you could go back to work, right? Well, that's true, but in that case, isn't it all right to just stay in our current rental apartment? Even if we buy a house, there's not zero chance that you won't end up having to take Anna and me with you, right? If we keep thinking that way, we'll never buy a house. But your concern is valid. Maybe we should go for a cheaper, used property. We'll put down a larger down payment and keep the mortgage short. Why's that? Well, if we ever have to move out of the house, we might need to sell it, right? If there's still a mortgage, we couldn't sell it. That makes sense. You really know your stuff from working in construction. I'm not a realtor, just have some knowledge on the side. While he verbally denied it, my husband seemed rather proud of himself. I agreed to his proposal, and we decided to buy a house. This will be our new home. Another move? Yes, but this will be the last one. You won't have to say goodbye to friends anymore. In elementary school, you can make as many friends as you want without feeling sad. Really? When we visited the house we bought before moving in, my daughter looked unsure. But once she knew there would be no more moving, she smiled and started running around the empty house. Just seeing her smile made me feel good about deciding to buy the house. It needs some repairs here and there, but it looks like something I can handle with a bit of DIY. I'll chip away at it when I have time. You really know your stuff from working in construction. I can rely on you. I'm not capable of everything, just DIY level, so don't expect professional craftsmanship. My husband began wandering around the house, checking where repairs were needed. He said not to expect professional level, but he looked somewhat proud of himself. We bought a used property for $300,000. It's not too spacious, but it's enough for the three of us, and since my husband will often be away on business, it's practically perfect. We paid a down payment of $100,000 and took out a short mortgage for 5 years. Having paid the down payment, our savings, which we had been slowly accumulating for over 10 years, have significantly decreased. Holding the passbook, it should weigh the same, yet it somehow feels lighter. Also, by shortening the mortgage, the monthly payment has become a bit hefty at $3,000 per month. Now that moving is off the table, I'm considering going back to a full-time job, just as my husband suggested. Once my daughter is in elementary school, going back to work wouldn't be impossible. However, with my husband away often, she will mostly have only me to rely on. So, I decided to return to work once my daughter is a bit older and will continue with my part-time job for now. It looks like my passbook will stay light for a while. Clean up well before Dad gets home tomorrow. I get to see Dad. Soon after we moved into the new house, my husband had to leave again for a solo assignment. It felt sad since we had just bought the house, but it seems this assignment was planned long ago. Now that we have a home and a family, he'll supposedly get some consideration in his assignments. While on assignment, my husband comes home about once or twice a month. My daughter looks forward to his returns and obediently cleans the house when he's coming. Perhaps because she only sees him about once a month, she doesn't have the dad dislike that many fathers of daughters her age worry about. Thus, even though my husband is often not at home, we've managed well in the 5 years since buying our house. I thought so, but it seems I just wasn't seeing the problems. My husband comes home once or twice a month. Sometimes, I go to him instead. During those times, my daughter stays with her grandparents. I visit my husband to check if he's eating balanced meals, keeping the house tidy, and staying healthy, among other things. Initially, checking for signs of infidelity was also on the list, but I haven't been doing that anymore. For the first year or two, I checked, but there were never any traces of infidelity in his room. Even if he were to cheat, I don't live with him, so he'd have plenty of time to erase any traces. Once, I tried some surprise visits to his room. Huh? Mary? You should have called me if you were coming. Well, I thought I'd surprise you, but I guess that backfired. Since I hadn't informed him beforehand, my husband was out dining with coworkers, and I ended up waiting until late at night. I couldn't just tell him it was a surprise inspection, so I just gave a wry smile to cover it up. It was entirely my fault for waiting in vain. Yet, when he came back, he apologized for not being home sooner. Suddenly, I felt the meaninglessness and emptiness of what I was doing. Since then, I always call him the night before when I'm planning to visit. I'll be coming over tomorrow morning. I always send a message to my husband before going to bed. The next day, as I arrived at my husband's house and was about to ring the doorbell, I heard his voice inside. He seemed to be talking to someone, but I couldn't make out the other person's voice. Maybe a coworker is visiting? But I did inform him last night that I'd be coming. I pulled back my finger from the doorbell and checked my phone. Next to the message I thought I had sent last night, there was a mark, unsent, indicating a sending error. After hesitating for a bit, I reached for the doorbell again. If the person inside was a coworker, I'd greet them. If a friend, I'd wait outside for a bit. I was taking it lightly, but it seems my husband was in quite a predicament. As I was about to ring, a sudden burst of noise came from the intercom. Following the noise, loud sounds came from inside, as if enough to complain from the floor below. He must have seen me on the monitor. This is definitely suspicious.
Hey, are you there? Can you open up quickly?
I couldn't wait any longer and knocked on the door. Mary? Sorry, I was in the bathroom and didn't notice. Just a sec. I just came out and need to wash my hands. There was still a lot of banging around inside. What's there to thrash about when using the bathroom? And it's been about 3 minutes since he said to wait. Did his hands get that dirty just from going to the bathroom? Impatient again, I knocked on the door. Hey! How long does it take to wash your hands? My bad, my bad. I'm coming to open it now. Finally, with some clattering, he opened the front door. What's the rush? Don't you usually call before coming? I realized there was a sending error with the message right in front of your house. I pushed past my husband and marched into the house. Looking at his face, he clearly couldn't hide his panic. We're on the 3rd floor of the apartment, so there's no escaping through the windows. I narrowed it down to the balcony or the closet. Oh no! The closet was the right guess. The other person averted their eyes, not wanting to meet mine. They looked quite young, almost like a college student. And, upon closer inspection, their clothes seemed hastily put on, slightly disheveled. No explanation needed. As I glared at my husband, understanding the situation, he let out a resigned sigh. I had both of them sit on the living room floor, and decided to hear the full story first. Clearly, this was my moment to confront them. Yet, the situation was about to take an unexpected turn. You are having an affair, right? No, Miranda is just a friend. It's not like that. Then why was she hiding in the closet? She acted this way because she was afraid of being misunderstood like this. It's not like you caught us in the act, right? Without any proof, accusing us of an affair is pretty insulting to Miranda. Indeed, my husband was right, I had no concrete proof of an affair. It was just that there was a woman in his room. He seemed to think he could get away with it, a slight ease appearing on his face. As I began to regret my impulsive actions, the other woman poked my husband in the side and started saying something unsettling. Isn't it about time? Yeah. I hope to avoid paying any settlement for an affair, but that seems impossible now. Timing? Settlement? The keywords I caught from their whispers gave me a bad feeling. Hey, let's get divorced. My fears were confirmed. It seemed my husband had beaten me to the punch. He appeared to have resigned himself to the situation. People who have nothing to lose are frightening. I was supposed to have the upper hand by accusing him of infidelity, yet somehow, the tables were turning. We've been together for 5 years. Not right after we bought the house. Yeah, bad timing. To meet the real love of your life right after buying a house. The real love of your life? What does that mean? Just what it sounds like. Unlike you, Miranda would move with me when I relocate for work. But we bought the house so you wouldn't have to move, and we have Anna, too. I guess when we bought the house, I wished you had said you'd move with me. And Miranda has a child, too. Born 5 years ago. 5 years ago? That's when you and Miranda started your relationship, right? Don't tell me Miranda was married? No. The child is mine and Miranda's. We had a child soon after we met. The name's Andy. Yeah, when Miranda got pregnant at 18, I was worried. But having a child made me commit. Huh? A child between you two? Yes. Huh? A child between you two? So, I said yes. I thought I misheard, so I ended up asking the same question twice. It seems it was not a misunderstanding. My husband has been having an affair for the past 5 years, and his mistress gave birth to his child 5 years ago. It turns out I have a 5-year-old child. What's more, their names are Anna and Andy, just 1 letter apart. It's creepy to choose such similar names. It was a shocking fact, but my husband mentioned it so casually that it still doesn't feel real to me. However, I was still able to continue our conversation despite being shaken. If we divorce, I'll be taking alimony and child support from you. That's true. It's a shame, but it can't be helped. Instead of that, how about you give us the house? What? Property division, alimony, and child support are separate, right? What do you mean instead? That's not gonna fly. But we're gonna live as a couple from now on, and we might have more kids. But you're gonna be a single mom soon, right? You won't need a big house like that for just 2 people. So you're saying I can take Anna, right? Yeah. I don't dislike Anna, but Miranda might. So, I'll give her to you. As I talk to my husband, my body heats up more and more. At this rate, I feel like I might lash out at him. But doing that could put me at a disadvantage in the upcoming divorce. I clench my back teeth and tense all my muscles to keep myself from moving. Hey, say something. I'm taking the house, okay? The house is in my name, and I paid for all of it. Unable to speak, I just shook my head slightly from side to side. Huh? Why not? You want the house too? That's greedy. Okay, you can take more of our savings. That okay? I shook my head again. Don't be more demanding. Oh, are you dragging this out because you don't want to divorce me? It's useless, you know. I'm definitely getting a divorce. Andy will be starting elementary school in 6 months. I want to finish Miranda and Andy's move by then. And I want to prepare comfortably, so can you leave in about 3 months? As I shook my head again, my husband stood up, grabbed my arm, and forcefully pulled me to my feet. Stop acting like a child. The divorce is final. 3 months is enough time to move out. So, that's that. My husband dragged me to the entrance and threw me out of the house. The force of the throw was strong, and I lost my balance and fell on my butt. My husband looked down at me as I lay on the ground, smirking slowly as he closed the door. Despite his wrongdoing, why do I have to feel such a strong sense of defeat and misery? Wiping away my tears, I went back home. 2 weeks after experiencing the humiliating defeat from my husband. A divorce application with my husband's name already filled in was sent to our house. It seems he wants me to file it. Is this the divorce papers? That's great. Now you can separate from Dad. Anna, that's a big statement. Didn't you like your dad? Not anymore. Oh, Mom. The phone is ringing again. You're really busy, aren't you? That's true. Divorce sure takes a lot of effort. I didn't sugarcoat the reasons for our divorce too much when explaining it to my daughter, though I did soften the expression for a 5th grader. After some thought, I decided it was better for her to know exactly what her father did and judge him as wrong, since she can discern right from wrong at age 10. Knowing about her father's affair, my daughter seemed more angry than sad. I'm relieved that my daughter isn't too upset. 3 months later. I was busy looking for a job to support our life together and dealing with the divorce, so we hadn't moved out yet. As we hadn't left after 3 months, my ex-husband began calling frequently. When are you going to move out? I'm sorry. Things have been hectic, and the move keeps getting postponed. You're not planning to squat in the house, are you? I wouldn't do that. Then hurry up and move out. Startled by my ex-husband's loud voice, I instinctively pulled the smartphone away from my ear. Though it's bad that I haven't moved out yet, I wish he would remember why we are getting divorced in the first place. If he did, he wouldn't be able to yell at me like this. 3 days after the call from my ex-husband, he lost his patience and resorted to drastic measures. One Sunday, my daughter and I were organizing our belongings at home. We hadn't found a new place yet, but since my ex-husband was being insistent, we were preparing so we could move out as soon as we found a new home. While we were busy packing for the move, the doorbell rang. Huh? What are you doing here? Since you've been squatting here forever, I had to make arrangements on my own. Anyway, open the door. Reluctantly, I headed to the front door. When I went outside, not only was my ex-husband there, but also his mistress and a little girl were standing in front of the house. There was also a large truck parked. Then, please start moving the stuff out. Wait a minute. What do you mean? This is my house. It's natural for me to return once my previous job is done, right? But you're still squatting here, so I arranged to have your stuff moved to a nearby storage unit. I've paid the rental for 3 months, so once you find a place, you can move your things yourself. You need to leave the house now. Go to a hotel or back to your parents' place. There's no need to rush things like this. I want to take care of my new family. Hurry up and pack your things and get out. From inside, movers began to carry out the boxes we had packed for moving. Look, you were already preparing to move. Among the movers, my daughter came out of the house. Mom. What's this? My daughter looked at my ex-husband with disdain, as if she was looking at an insect. Kids these days seem much more mature than when we were children. She seemed to grasp the current situation by the moving boxes and the fact that my ex-husband was back. Mom. Let's just get out of here. My daughter tugged at the hem of my shirt. She didn't want to be near her father for even a second. Since our stuff was being moved, I grabbed my wallet in one hand and my daughter's hand in the other, and we left the house. Take care now. Dad, this is the end of your life. Huh? The kid's getting cheeky. Thinking my daughter shouldn't say anything more, I quickly pulled her hand and signaled her to be quiet. Right up until the end, my ex-husband kept provoking me. Perhaps unable to tolerate his attitude, my daughter turned around and muttered a retort. Annoyed by her words, my ex-husband hurled insults directly at her. There was really no need to say such things to a 10-year-old child. However, seeing my ex-husband lash out, it seemed my daughter wasn't fazed by his words. I turned my back on my ex-husband and breathed a sigh of relief. My daughter's retort wasn't just bravado. Perhaps my ex-husband really is nearing the end of his rope. He'll soon realize why I've been so busy these past 3 months, putting off the move. After leaving the house, my daughter and I started living in an apartment near my ex-husband's house. I promised my daughter she wouldn't have to say goodbye to her school friends, and I have to keep that promise. I would have liked to move farther away from my ex-husband, but the move was within a range that didn't require her to change schools. The lack of suitable houses nearby was one reason the move was delayed. Moving was distressing in various ways, but now, my daughter and I are living a peaceful life. Yet, as if to disrupt this peace, my ex-husband called. Hey. What's this about? I got a call from the lawyer. We're divorced, and the reason was your affair and the child, so it's not surprising to get a call from a lawyer, right? It's about the content of the call. I get the alimony of $60,000 for the affair. But what's this compensation fee? They're saying I owe an additional $100,000? And? There's nothing strange about that. Just pay what you owe. You took the house when we divorced. Whether you paid the full purchase cost or not, it was marital property. So as part of the property division, I'm entitled to half of that house, right? The current value of the house is about $200,000. So, I have the right to get $100,000 from you. It seems my efforts are finally paying off. My lawyer has coached me on what to say if my ex-husband argues. I'm fully prepared now and I can surely respond to whatever my ex-husband says. It's been my turn for a while now. My daughter heard me talking on the phone with the lawyer and told me, this is preparation to discipline Dad. That's why, when we were leaving the house, she said to my ex-husband, Dad, this is the end of your life. At that time, I was nervous that my ex-husband would suspect I was up to something. So, it's been 3 months since we divorced. Are you bringing up the house issue now? You agreed that I could have the house. The right to demand property division doesn't disappear for 2 years after a divorce, so 3 months is no issue. Besides, I never agreed to give you the house. That can't be true. I clearly told you. In exchange for the house, I was gonna give you more of our savings. You said that, but did I respond? Did I nod? I shook my head, and you just went ahead with your plans and kicked me out of the house, right? So, the negotiation isn't over. It seems like you ended it on your own. That's why I had the lawyer handle the compensation claim. So, I have to pay you $160,000 for the affair and this compensation? Don't forget about Anna's child support. I got almost all of our savings, so this payment is gonna be tough for you. But here's some good news. The lawyer must have explained, the compensation is $100,000, but you only have to pay an additional $70,000. That's right, he did say something like that. I gave you most of our savings, about $60,000. Yes. We paid a larger down payment on the house and set up a shorter mortgage term, so we hardly saved any money. Remember, you said it's not a big amount, so just take it all, but the original money I should have received from the property division was $30,000, so the extra $30,000 I got counts towards the compensation. Still, you thought you could manage because you had a house and a job, and now you've almost nothing left. Can you really come up with $130,000 right now? I know very well that my ex-husband, who's practically broke, can't come up with $130,000 immediately. Since he couldn't see my face over the phone, I couldn't stop smirking. It's impossible right now. I'd like to pay in installments. That's a no-go. Alimony and property division are usually paid in full. If you want to pay in installments, I'd have to agree, but I absolutely will not. But if I don't have it, I can't pay. Then we'll just move to the next step. We'll proceed with the necessary actions and eventually, it will come to forced execution. Forced execution? Like seizing property? That's what it means. We could seize the house, but there's also a way to garnish your wages. Garnish my wages? If that happens, it really is the end of my life. Not all of your salary will be taken, so don't worry. But it will get around at work. It'll surely make things awkward for you. In the end, I won't be able to work. What am I supposed to do? My ex-husband seemed to realize he was in a no-win situation, as his voice grew fainter and fainter. Since it seemed I might soon not be able to hear him at all, I turned up the volume on my smartphone. There is one way to avoid forced execution. What should I do? Sell the house. If you sell the house, you'll get $200,000, so you could pay the $130,000 with that? I won't agree to installments, but I can wait for the payment if you sell the house. I see. If I pay the $130,000, I'll still have $70,000 left. My ex-husband seemed frustrated that selling the house was his only option. Yet, knowing he'd still have $70,000 left seemed to make him a bit more optimistic. He's probably imagining a bright future, working together with his new wife. However, I don't think that future will ever come. Speaking of which, you're on a business trip alone again, aren't you? Yeah, I'm not at that house right now. I'll sell the house, but it might take some time, so can you wait for the payment? That's fine, but do you know what Miranda is up to while you're away from home? What? Are you saying Miranda is having an affair? Well, you could say I'm half right. I live near that house, right? So, I occasionally see her at the local supermarket. She's walking with a young man. Just an acquaintance, right? But, I sneaked closer and listened to their conversation. I heard things like Andy doesn't know yet and just hang on a little longer, I'm getting things ready. Hey, is Andy really your child? She's my child for sure. You're just trying to corner me and enjoy my reaction. What a nasty woman. The volume on my smartphone was up, so when he suddenly yelled, I thought my eardrum would burst. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at the screen. The call time had stopped. It seems he hung up the phone as he was yelling. Having been married to him, I understand. He was clearly shaken. He must have some suspicions. Imagining the frantic expression on my ex-husband's face on the other side of the phone, I couldn't help but smirk again. Later, He sold the house and paid me $130,000. He was left with $70,000. $70,000 is a decent amount of money, but considering it came from selling the house, it feels small. And that money will likely be consumed by child support payments for my daughter. I think he must feel quite empty. After losing the house, Miranda started attacking him over discrepancies with what she had heard, and the two began to fight frequently. It seems that their arguments, filled with yelling and shouting, echoed around the neighborhood at night. In the flow of these fights, my ex-husband finally asked Miranda, "Is Andy really my child?" and plunged into a real mess. After a huge row about whether or not to do a DNA test for Andy, Miranda admitted to cuckolding. She was 18 when she got pregnant, and as neither of them were financially stable to raise a child, she approached my ex-husband for his money and house, seeing that he liked her. Once he learned the truth, my ex-husband divorced her. Their marriage ended after just 3 months. Now, involving the real father of the child, there's a messy battle ongoing. They argue about return the child support he has been paying for 5 years, thinking she was his child and the money she received was during their relationship, so she won't return it, with everyone emotionally drained and in turmoil. The only silver lining is that the child has returned to her real parents. The real father of the child has apparently become financially stable enough to support a child over the past 5 years. I'm glad, because I didn't want the innocent child caught in the middle to suffer. Having lost his home, family, and money, and with his mind shattered by the cuckolding incident, my ex-husband's downfall continues. He had been bragging at work about remarrying a 23-year-old woman. Yet, he was discarded by both me and his affair partner, and is now mired in a messy battle over the cuckolding. Such stories inevitably spread at work, and while he received some sympathetic words, he was mostly snickered at behind his back. Unable to cope with the situation, mentally shattered, he sold the house and then vanished. Since he lost his job too, he truly lost everything. The child support is being paid regularly, so he must be working somewhere. As long as I receive the child support, I have no interest in what he does or where he is. I continue to live just with my daughter. She seems unaffected by the affair or the divorce, and is happy every day. I have left my part-time job and found full-time employment. I plan to work hard for my daughter's sake from now on. Let's start soon. If we don't get back, we'll get caught. Don't worry, Alexander. No one suspects anything about us. That's true. Once I get married, it'll be harder to meet, so let's take our time and enjoy today. On the eve of the wedding, I was at my in-laws' house, having a meal with 15 family members. During that time, I was secretly watching Alexander's behavior. For your information, Alexander is my fiancé and future husband, and Sandra is my sister. He sneaked out of the house, so I followed him quietly and started tailing him. Alexander headed to a nearby apartment building. It was the apartment where Alexander and I were living together. After making sure Alexander entered the apartment, I checked my smartphone and could hear him talking with my sister up to this moment. I know everything. I have prepared to bring down Alexander and my sister to hell. It's all over for you. Holding my smartphone in front of the apartment, I muttered quietly to myself. Several hours later, Alexander and my sister returned to the in-laws' house. We're back. Man, we're so late. Everyone gathered at the in-laws, including me, looked at them with disapproval. There were my sister's husband Tony, and Alexander's, and my parents. Is there any food left? Man, I was called out due to trouble with a client. It was so busy, no time to rest. Alexander and I rushed in, and thankfully, it settled down, but it was really tough. We're starving. As Alexander and my sister were settling down, trying to explain how busy they had been, they tried to take their seats. Just as they sat down, I started the conversation. Alexander, I'm sorry to bring this up suddenly, but let's cancel the wedding. What did you just say? I mean, I can't marry you. Hey, what are you saying in front of everyone? Tomorrow is our wedding day. That's right, Rita. Why don't you calm down? Suddenly, when I proposed breaking off the engagement, Alexander and my sister started making a fuss, and at that moment, my sister's husband Tony handed her a piece of paper. Sandra, I'm divorcing you too. Sign this now. What are you talking about, Tony? The two, completely clueless, were flustered. The why were clearly confused. It's rude to joke like this in front of everyone who gathered for us. Keep the jokes to a minimum. Or are you angry? As I said, I was called out by the company, so it can't be helped. That's right, Tony. We've been doing well, haven't we? This joke isn't funny. We've been doing well? Rude in front of everyone? I don't want to hear that from you too. Both of you have been cheating. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I haven't done anything like that. You're making false accusations. The two, caught red-handed, showed contrasting reactions. My sister began to redden and grow angry. On the other hand, Alexander twisted his face and then sighed deeply. Look, Rita. Don't you realize you're saying something odd? You know I've been busy with work and business trips, right? So busy that I sometimes can't even make it to the wedding planning meetings. I don't have time to cheat. Alexander seemed intent on playing innocent. When blamed for a fault, he would shift the blame onto others. I had only recently discovered this habit of Alexander's. So, you're both saying you were late just because of work? Of course. We wouldn't lie at a time like this. We both hold responsible positions, after all. Did Alexander and my sister think they had managed a convincing excuse? They both nodded in agreement. My sister and Alexander worked in the same department at the same company. So, their claim about being busy with work wasn't necessarily inconsistent. As Alexander had mentioned earlier, ever since our wedding was decided, he had been extremely busy. He was appointed as a project leader, which meant his overtime and weekend work had significantly increased. Furthermore, he had repeatedly canceled wedding planning meetings due to suddenly important business negotiations. Yet, it was Alexander who initially insisted on having a grand wedding. But his enthusiasm only lasted until the first meeting with the planner. Gradually, everything was left up to me. I'm sorry for being late to the important dinner. It took longer than expected. But from now on, it'll be okay. You know we're doing important work, right? What exactly was going to be okay? Alexander was confident without any basis. He probably thought he could easily talk his way out of this. As the conversation went on quietly, my father-in-law spoke up. So you really went to work then? That's what I've been saying, haven't I? Whether you went to work or not, are you really sure about that? Repeating my father-in-law's words, I brought out a camera I had hidden in another room. This room had a large TV where everyone could see. I connected the camera to the TV and played the recording. Let's start soon. If we don't get back, we'll get caught. Don't worry, Alexander. No one suspects anything about us. That's true. Once I get married, it'll be harder to meet, so let's enjoy today slowly. The video was the same one I had been watching on my smartphone a few hours earlier while tailing Alexander and my sister. Actually, I've been watching your actions all day with this pet camera. Quite a mess, isn't it? Alexander and my sister, just having seen their earlier actions, were stunned. Why is this being recorded? I had always wanted to own a cat since I was young. Unfortunately, it turned out my father was allergic to cats, so it was impossible to have one at home. So, that's why I thought about getting a cat in the apartment where we live now. When I discussed it with Alexander, he seemed indifferent and just said, "Do whatever you want." I happen to know someone who fosters cats, and they arranged to give me a newborn kitten next month. For now, I had prepared everything perfectly, including a cat cage, a food container, a toilet, and even a pet camera to check on things when I'm not home. Oh, Alexander didn't know about it, did you? You have always been all about work. You hardly ever stayed home. I just set up the camera recently. I thought you would notice something as obvious as the pet camera being installed. Tony, who is not good with gadgets, bought and helped me install the camera instead of me. I had told him beforehand, yet he was too preoccupied to listen. Were you just too caught up in work, or should I say, the affair, to notice? At first, my parents and in-laws seemed puzzled. But as they listened to our exchange and saw the evidence, they clearly expressed their anger. To think that those who were about to become relatives were cheating. And it was revealed right in front of the whole family. With wedding coming up, what are you two doing? What a thing to happen. I'm ashamed even though you're my own children. Rita, I'm truly sorry. My parents' and in-laws' expressions rapidly changed from anger at Alexander and my sister to apologize to me and Tony. It's not something you should apologize for, I thought, as I looked at Alexander and the others. I guess you can't talk your way out of this one, I said, forcing a slight smile. Perhaps displeased by my demeanor, Alexander's face twisted, and he suddenly started making excuses. Enough already. The project's been tough, and the colleagues are useless, so I had no choice but to work overtime and on weekends. Coming home late like this and Rita doesn't even care, just keeps talking about the wedding, it was just adding to the pressure. It was, what you call, pre-wedding blues. It's your fault for not noticing how tired I am, he implied, once again blaming others for his problems. Once again, Alexander deflected blame onto others while absolving himself. Rita has always been clueless, you know. Alexander even complained about it at work. He didn't want to come home. But Sandra, on the other hand, is kind and considerate. I guess the devil got into me. It's inevitable, right? They say cheating is a man's nature, and you won't make a good wife if you fuss over this. My sister ridiculed me with a laugh. Alexander spoke in a tone as if he had resigned himself to his fate. Seeing the attitudes of the two, my anger grew. After all, it was my sister who had introduced me to Alexander. She had told me about a single colleague who might be a good match and introduced Alexander to me. My first impression of Alexander was that he was serious and had a gentle demeanor. He might have been a bit careless with time and attire, but he was someone who would take the lead. But the Alexander before me now had none of those traits. It was my in-laws who showed more anger than I did at this point. You kids, they almost leaped at Alexander and my sister. But Alexander and my sister smoothly dodged and continued to laugh flippantly. Even in this situation, the two of them showed their composure. I sighed as I looked at them. I knew they were lying about something else. By the way, when I was going to wash Alexander's jacket and checked the pockets, I found this. I pulled a piece of paper from the pocket. Everyone, you understand what I'm trying to say with this, right? The relatives stared at the paper I was holding. Everyone seemed to catch on quickly, tilting their heads and murmuring, huh? Alexander, weren't you busy with work? You said you were working overtime and even on weekends every day, right? What I had pulled out was Alexander's most recent pay stub. Despite his claims of frequent overtime and weekend work, only about 5 hours were recorded as overtime. Normally, you'd think that was just enough to handle some tasks at the beginning and end of the month. Doing overtime every day, and this is all the overtime hours you have? That doesn't add up, does it? Then Alexander made an unbelievable excuse. Look, if you've been following the news, you'd know. There's no company that pays out all the overtime these days because of the recession. Don't underestimate the life of a salaried worker. So, you're saying your company is exploitative company? Well, indeed, my job is not that of a salaried worker, I work as a freelancer from home. Originally, I also worked at a company, but at Alexander's strong insistence, he said, I might be too busy to help much at home, so I'd prefer if you could work from home and take care of the housework too. But that's not the issue here. I decided to bring out new evidence. I tossed a thick envelope. Take a look inside, will you? As Alexander and my sister looked inside the envelope, their faces gradually turned pale. Inside were numerous photos of Alexander and my sister meeting up. Pictures of them arm in arm entering a hotel in a bustling district. There were also photos of them embracing in front of my sister's house. Did they really think they could be so blatant and not get caught? The sudden increase in your overtime and weekend work, and the timing of your cancellations of the wedding preparations were too coincidental. That's why I secretly checked when Alexander finished work and followed him. You were supposed to be working at night or doing housework, right? You skipped that to stalk me? That's low. What are you, a stalker? Who's the lowest here? Plus, I'm not dumb enough to let my fiancé run wild. By the way, I didn't do this alone, okay? What do you mean? Alexander answered irritably. I glanced at Tony. No way. Tony also started suspecting something when my sister began coming home late. Tony and I alternated tracking where Alexander went after work. It turned out that all the days he claimed to have overtime, weekend work, or business trips, he was actually meeting with my sister. And yes, on the days he canceled attending the wedding preparations, he was meeting her as well. Just to be sure, I even called the department at the company where Alexander and my sister work. Here's what I was told during that call. The whole company has been reducing overtime and weekend work due to work reform policies. Business trips are very rare at this company. There shouldn't have been any orders for Alexander. That's good to know. Thank you. The amount of work in their department is pretty much fixed, and overtime is only necessary at the beginning and end of the month. Also, the story about Alexander being appointed as a project leader turned out to be a complete lie. You were just shoved into a back office at work because of your bad conduct, right? Well, that aside, the pet camera I installed came in handy. It caught your affair on tape perfectly. Trying to go through with the wedding and expecting Tony to continue the marriage under these circumstances is absurd. But just calling off the engagement or getting a divorce isn't enough for Tony and me, so we decided to get our revenge right here in front of everyone. Cornered with no way out, Alexander and Sandra were gritting their teeth. The relatives were visibly angry about their deceit and their reluctance to admit to the affair despite pretending to be busy with work. They crowded around, hurling insults. While Rita has been diligently working and doing household chores, what in the world were you two thinking? Sandra, I'm so disappointed. You used to be so reliable, especially having someone wonderful like Tony. You pride yourself on your work, and Tony showed understanding by not minding your supposed work commitments, and you betray him like this, you foolish girl. Feeling overwhelmed by their parents' fierce demeanor, Alexander and Sandra both knelt down, touching their hands and faces to the floor, saying, "We're truly, truly sorry." They stayed down without raising their faces for a while, but either way, Tony and I had no intention of forgiving them. Look, Rita, as I said before, this was all just a fling. You know how people sometimes want to have a bit of fun before getting married, right? It happens all the time in TV shows. So, once we're married, I'll be all yours. So, no calling off the engagement, please. I'm begging you. That's right. Alexander was just being pitiful, and I was just lending an ear as a colleague. Since we'll be family, I couldn't just dismiss him. So please, Tony, not a divorce. Everyone else could only sigh in disbelief at their audacity. If apologizing were enough, we wouldn't need police or laws. You two have acted shamefully, and I won't forgive you for anything. And Alexander, you're hiding something else, aren't you? What am I hiding? The room started buzzing with whispers. What? There's more? Everyone looked restless. Had Alexander admitted his faults from the start and shown a sincere apology, I might have been torn. But that wasn't the case. His behavior was filled with ugly evasion, excuses, and shifting the blame. I resolved to corner Alexander completely here. Sorry, there was one last thing left. I waved another document in the air. My sister snatched it from my hands. What now? We haven't done anything beyond what you know. What is this, Alexander? Her demeanor changed drastically from the one in the video. She confronted Alexander furiously. "All this time, you've been telling me there's only me for you. What is this?" Let me see." Alexander started trembling as he read the paper. The paper in Alexander and Sandra's hands was a detective's investigation report. Alexander had also been making moves on a female staff member at the wedding planners. I recall how during our first meeting, Alexander was unusually chatty with her. I was too naive to think he was just being enthusiastic. Thinking back, he must have harbored inappropriate thoughts towards her. Using the excuse that she was an important client and couldn't be offended, Alexander forcefully pursued her. Claiming to have an important matter, he would call her out over the phone, and once alone, he pressured her into a relationship. With the wedding approaching, you'd think we'd be having more in-depth discussions more often. But then the planner started acting distant and stopped showing up for meetings. When I investigated her situation along with the planners, it was utterly damning. Having an affair with my sister was shocking enough, but going after the planner too was beyond the pale. Most of the relatives had expressions of disgust, unable to listen any longer. In the midst of it all, someone kicked Alexander with tremendous force. How dare you deceive me like this? Don't mess with me. Ouch! Sandra, seizing the opportunity after the kick, repeatedly punched Alexander in the face. Sandra has always been strong. During her school days, she even won a karate competition at the state level. It's a shame to see such strength wasted in such a foolish way. What you did counts as domestic violence. I'm going to sue you, you violent, hysterical woman. Cheating, and you're talking about suing? That's rich. Despite his bold words, Alexander isn't suited for rough situations. He's notoriously unathletic. Yet, Alexander attempted to fight back. Though he couldn't overpower her, he pulled at Sandra's blouse and hair. Within minutes, both looked utterly disheveled. It's that moody nature of yours I hate. You snap at anything you don't like. And you're always whining, even though you're a man. Despite both having cheated, they continued to blame each other, making a noisy scene. The ridiculousness of their fight almost made me laugh. Just when the fight seemed to be settling down, Alexander made a terrifying excuse. Look, it was going to be tough to keep things up with Sandra once I married Rita. That's why I wanted to keep the planner on the side. What? Just earlier, he had been claiming he'd be devoted to Rita once they were married. His true feelings had slipped out. It seems he was planning to cheat repeatedly. What an incorrigible fool. As I thought about proceeding with the divorce, Sandra was trying to cozy up to Tony. See? You understand now, right? I was deceived too. Tony, you'll give us another chance, right? Tony, red-faced with anger, pushed her away. So, I'm not a victim because I was cheated on? Cheating is cheating, even if you were deceived. How can I forgive you after causing such a commotion? Naturally, the relatives looked on with cold eyes. Tony simply said, I will never forgive you, and glared fiercely at Alexander and Sandra one last time. Oh, and by the way, Alexander, you're paying the full cancellation fee for the venue. Shouldn't we split it? Whose fault do you think this is? Remember, I was the one who said I'd pay for the wedding expenses before we got married. You wouldn't listen and didn't pay a dime, so I covered it all. That's not enough. I'll also be taking compensation. Damn, I should have never cheated in the first place. Beside him, Sandra was sobbing. Oh, right. I've already discussed this with your company, so expect a call from them soon. It was a long day, but my engagement with Alexander was definitely off. Sandra and Tony's divorce was, of course, inevitable. With the evidence and photos I had gathered through a detective, everything proceeded smoothly. In the aftermath, Sandra was disowned by my parents, and Alexander was cut off by my in-laws, naturally. As I mentioned earlier, Tony and I had already reported their actions to the company. Originally, both were already poorly regarded at work, and the affair scandal didn't help, leaving Alexander without a place there. Unable to bear it, Alexander quit voluntarily, but re-employment has been difficult since he's nearly 40 and hadn't been doing any significant work before. Worse still, he's being sued for compensation by the husband of the wedding planner he harassed. Alexander knew she was married and even blackmailed her, saying, "You don't want your husband to find out, do you?" This situation has even involved the police. Now, Alexander is taking multiple part-time jobs from dawn till dusk, trying to pay both the compensation and the cancellation fees for the wedding. He literally has no time to mess around with women anymore. Months after the divorce, Alexander started calling me multiple times a day. I didn't want to hear his voice, but he was so persistent that I decided to confront him just once. "I need you, Rita. I won't cheat again, please, let's start over." His crying almost swayed me. But I decided to make my last remark snide. "Why don't you just stay with my favorite sister, Sandra?" At that, Alexander broke down even more. "No. I want nothing to do with her anymore. She's gotten crazy lately." Alexander then shakily began to explain recent events about Sandra. "She's been in trouble with the police for stalking." "Stalking?" "She's been picked up by the police for stalking. She's been showing up at every job I take. Fighting so much and now this, it's almost funny. Don't mock me. She's become isolated at work or something and is obsessively clinging to me now. She calls me dozens of times a day. I never thought she'd be such a creepy old lady. I'm done with her for good." "That's not possible." "Why not?" "Sandra has always had a clingy streak. Once she starts, she doesn't listen to anyone." "You knew about this situation and still listened?" "Yes. Didn't I tell you I have a relative in the police? They were the ones who restrained Sandra. It was one of my cousin's subordinates, so I knew right away. If that's the case, help me out sooner. There's no reason for me to help. Oh, by the way, Sandra mentioned during her interrogation that she will never forgive Alexander, and she plans to follow him forever. She hasn't forgiven him for deceiving her and intends to stick to him for life." "You're lying." "Come on, weren't we almost family? You know, they say spouses should help each other." "I don't know. You two were the ones who cheated and got together, so maybe you should just get along?" "No one will bother you. How nice for you." Suddenly, I heard loud knocking in the background. She's come to my house now. Help me, hey." Chuckling, I quietly hung up the phone. Once, I genuinely wanted to marry Alexander. Now, that thought seems unbelievable. Once I started doubting and investigating, the extent of Alexander's failings came to light one after another. I feel truly relieved that I discovered everything before we got married. My parents have completely disowned Sandra. After discussing with my parents, we secretly moved to the countryside to live with distant relatives, without letting Sandra know. It was sad to leave friends and colleagues behind, but if moving helps me forget the incidents with Alexander and Sandra, then it's worth it. The relatives in the countryside, who were aware of the whole affair, welcomed us warmly. I had always lived in the city, so I was worried about adapting to country life, but as the old saying goes, you'll love wherever you live. Due to a shortage of workers, I was offered a job as a clerk at the local agricultural cooperative. On my days off, I sometimes help out in the relatives' fields. Everyone at work and the locals are very kind, and we help each other out in many ways. Maybe it's because I'm outside more, or perhaps it's because I've successfully distanced myself from Alexander, but I feel healthier than before. Even several months after moving to the countryside, Alexander continued to send me messages begging for help. He's trapped in a life where he can't escape from Sandra due to his own actions. He seems to be quite cornered, but that's none of my concern. I blocked his contact immediately because I didn't want my peaceful life to be disturbed. As for Tony, we've kept in touch even after moving away from the city. Though he hasn't moved far, he relocated his home to keep it secret. I called Tony to thank him again. "Tony, thank you so much for your help back then. Thanks to you, I'm now living happily at my relative's home. No, I should be the one thanking you. I'm sorry to speak ill of your sister, but I'm relieved to be away from such a terrible woman. Tony seemed brighter than before when we talked over the phone. I'm enjoying my work now. I'm definitely off marriage for a while. I feel the same way. But if the countryside is that nice, I might visit sometime. Please do. Let me know when you're coming. I thought it was just a polite offer, but once his work settled down, Tony actually came to visit. And that's how Tony ended up liking the countryside and eventually deciding to live here with me, but that's a story for another time. Surprise! Mom's coming along too! With those words, my husband's excited voice echoed through the entryway. Behind the cheerful husband and mother-in-law, I stood, unable to hide my shock. And for good reason. After all, the trip my husband mentioned his mother was joining us on was our honeymoon. As I stood confused, unable to comprehend what my husband was saying, he pursed his lips and frowned. What's the matter? Aren't you happy? Happy? That was the last thing I could be. He must have known that. After all, I had repeatedly expressed how terrible my relationship with my mother-in-law was. She seems unable to forgive me for stealing her precious son. Whenever she sees me, she piles on the sarcasm as much as she possibly can. The tricky part is, she never shows this side of herself in front of my husband. She plays the part of the good mother-in-law perfectly. Because of this, no matter how much I confided in my husband about being mistreated, he barely believed me. However, he should have been well aware of my discomfort around her. Yet he planned something like this. What was he thinking? Hold on, it's today? There's no way we can get a flight or hotel now. Of course, I hadn't booked anything for his mother. Trying to tag along without reservations during the peak travel season is unimaginable. As I explained this, my husband snorted as if it were obvious. Well, give me all your tickets then. I'll go with Mom. He reached out as if it were the most natural thing in the world, leaving me speechless. Really, what is he thinking? This isn't just any trip, it's our honeymoon. What kind of husband would go on his honeymoon with his mother? No, even a regular trip with this mother-in-law would be dreadful. As my mouth fell open in shock, my mother-in-law had a triumphant look on her face. It must be a proud moment for her, her son choosing her over his wife. Come on, hurry up. I paid for it, so it shouldn't matter, right? Thinking that because he paid for the trip, he could do whatever he wanted, this man. As I thought about it, something occurred to me. By the way, about the cost of this trip. My name is Kelly. I'm 28 years old and work for the company my father manages. Despite the initial criticism of my being a nepotism hire, I've worked diligently and started to earn some recognition. However, being the boss's daughter, I still occasionally hear hurtful comments behind my back. My husband, Tom, has been my support through all of this. He's the same age as me and was assigned to the same team, making it easy for us to start dating. He handled his work efficiently and contributed significantly to our performance, which pleased my father immensely. When we announced our engagement, my father was all for it. So you're Tom. I've heard a lot about you. Yes, I'll make your daughter happy. I remember how bright those exchanges between my father and Tom seemed at the time. At that point, my father was considering handing over the company to someone else. And there was even talk of Tom taking over. Being able to entrust the business to a capable son-in-law probably wasn't an unpleasant thought for my father. Since I was never one to be at the forefront, having a capable son-in-law to take over the company was the best possible outcome. That's probably what he was thinking. Although my father never directly discussed these matters with me or Tom, he often spoke about the mindset needed for managing during our meals together, so it seemed likely that it would happen eventually. Tom's father had passed away, and his mother lived alone in their family home. Tom always took great care of his mother, even rushing to her side during our dates if she needed help. He was raised by her alone, and he wanted to repay that debt, apologizing as I smiled and sent him off. How wonderful it was to be involved with someone who cherished his mother so much. But after we got married and started living together, I began to notice things. "I'm just gonna pop over to Mom's place." This phrase had become almost like a mantra for him. And he went to see her almost every week. "Is your mother feeling ill?" When I asked out of concern, it seemed that was not the case. "Kelly, don't worry about it. Everyone needs some time to themselves, right?" At first, he would say this while stroking my head, but even that had stopped recently. One Saturday morning, as he was cheerfully preparing to leave, I asked him, "Hey, are you going over to your mom's place again today?" Until then, my husband, who had been in a good mood, abruptly stopped what he was doing and let out a heavy sigh. "Hey, what's up with that tone?" Startled by his words, I shrank back. Damn, I had spoken more harshly than I intended, but it was too late. He turned around and glared at me sharply. "It can't be helped. My mom is alone at home. I'm just checking in on her because you said you didn't like it, okay?" I flinched at his response. Yes, I've always been uncomfortable around my mother-in-law. It wasn't always like this, of course. The mother of the man I love. I wanted to cherish her just as much as my husband does. That was what I thought initially. But it's not guaranteed that the feeling will be reciprocated. My mother-in-law seemed to think of me as a cat thief who had stolen her son. Ever since we met, she had been making snide remarks when my husband wasn't around. It happened the first time I went to greet her. As soon as my husband left the table to use the restroom, and the sound of his footsteps faded, her demeanor changed completely. She looked me up and down as if appraising me. "I don't care if you're the boss's daughter or whatever, you're nothing special." Before I could recover from the shock, she continued with heavy sarcasm. "To think you'd show your face after stealing Tom from me. I don't acknowledge you at all. Don't get it twisted." She sneered at me, taking me aback, and slurped her coffee. Naturally, she hadn't served any coffee in front of me. "Hey! Don't talk to me. It's creepy. Why did I have to face such hostility from someone I had just met?" Even though I tried hard to speak up, she dismissed me immediately. As I stood bewildered, feeling utterly isolated, the sound of my husband returning from the restroom reached my ears. And just like that, as if nothing had happened, my mother-in-law suddenly smiled warmly again and offered me coffee as if she had just remembered. "Oh, I'm sorry. Here I am not even offering you coffee." With a light laugh, my husband, who had just returned, forced a wry smile. "What's going on, Mom? You haven't served the coffee yet?" "She's a lovely girl, Tom. I just forgot to offer the coffee." Saying that, she smiled kindly, appearing to be a good-natured person. I'd be happy if Kelly would feel comfortable talking to me without any reservations. I felt a chill down my spine. Ever since then, my mother-in-law has continued to make cutting remarks whenever my husband is not around. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. My husband must be unaware of the malice she shows only to me. Despite my attempts to talk to him about it, he always insisted, "My mom would never say that. If you hate it so much, you don't have to see her." My words never seemed to convince him, and he looked disappointed. At first, I pleaded earnestly. But no matter what I said, my husband always sided with his mother, so I gave up trying to clear up the misunderstanding. And I decided to take my husband's words at face value. I didn't have to see her. I avoid visiting my in-laws unless absolutely necessary. From his perspective, I probably just seemed to dislike his important mother. "Then, make sure to lock up." Saying this, he headed to his mother's place without looking back at me again. Wait, I reached out, but grabbed only air. My husband's back blurred through my tears. On days we argue about his mother, he doesn't come home. It felt like a harsh reminder that his mother is more important to him than his wife. If it weren't for the issues with his mother, Tom would be a good husband. He notices when I'm struggling at work and supports me quickly, and even though he often works late, he helps with the housework. Maybe it's better this way since he said I don't have to see her, I muttered to myself while looking at a travel brochure. I shook my head, trying to focus on the plans in front of me. I had been looking forward to this honeymoon. For this honeymoon, at least, I won't have to think about my mother-in-law. At least my husband won't be called away to rush to her. Joining a team for a major project has increased my husband's overtime. As we consider his suggestions, I wonder where we should go. Perhaps we should indulge ourselves? As I flip through the pages, the temptation arises, but I quickly reconsider. Since I've left all the planning to you, at least let me pay for it from my account. Despite my insistence on sharing the costs of our honeymoon, he laughed it off without listening. If it's just him paying, spending too much isn't good. Moreover, I don't want to give my mother-in-law ammunition to mock me for being loose with money just because I'm the boss's daughter. With that thought, I can't help but smile wryly. I was trying to focus, but I find myself thinking about my mother-in-law again. Oh, stop it. Deciding to change the mood, I set aside the brochure and start preparing dinner as my husband will be home soon. Then comes the morning of our honeymoon. Amid my frantic preparations, the doorbell rings. Yes? I was at the door and, without checking the intercom, opened it only to be surprised. What? There she stood, in flashy clothes with a huge suitcase. Hearing my voice, my husband peeked out. You're early, Mom. He cheerfully greeted her. The mother-in-law, ignoring me, left me bewildered as I looked back and forth between them. Early? What do you mean? Despite the fact that we were supposed to be going on our honeymoon, what was with her massive luggage? Was she planning to stay at our place while we were gone? As I stood confused, my husband, with a smile resembling his mother's, announced. Surprise! Mom's coming with us. What? Shocked by my husband's solo applause. A foolish sound escaped me. What on earth are you talking about? Like I said, Mom's coming on our honeymoon. Unable to hide my confusion, my husband pursed his lips and said, then joyfully put his arm around his mother's shoulder. If we're going on a trip, it's better with Mom. Watching her sunbeam, my mother-in-law turned a smug face towards me. No, wait a minute. I try to calm my confused mind and ask carefully. It's our honeymoon, right? Aren't honeymoons supposed to be just for the couple? I mean, if you really wanted to invite an important family member, shouldn't you have discussed it first? Am I wrong? I'm not wrong, right? Yet why do they look puzzled by my words? It's like we're not speaking the same language, and I can't believe what my husband is saying. Furthermore, my mother-in-law, seemingly pleased by my distress, even starts humming. Why do we have to argue on what should be a joyful honeymoon day? And a surprise? What do you mean by springing this on the day of the trip? What's the big deal? I paid for it, so it's fine. My husband snaps, noticing my stunned expression. No, it's not fine. Was his insistence on paying not to ease my burden, but to make sure I couldn't object to bringing his mother? Wait, you can't just spring this on me, it's obviously impossible. I say, sighing in frustration. Both my husband and mother-in-law start to look visibly upset. What do you mean, impossible? Oh, Kelly just doesn't want to travel with me. My mother-in-law complains as if she's the victim, my husband acting childishly, mirroring her tone. My headache intensifies. It's not about wanting or not wanting. Tom, did you even book the flight and hotel for your mom? He looks baffled. Huh? We can book that now. That's impossible. Do you know how far in advance I had to make reservations? I raise my voice, incredulous at their lack of planning. Could they really have thought it would all just work out on the day? Though I had resolved not to splurge, the hotel I booked was quite nice. Especially now during a peak travel period. There's no way there are vacancies on flights or at the hotel now. I argue, and my husband nonchalantly holds out his hand. Then give me all your tickets. What? I ask, utterly bewildered. Just give me your tickets if there aren't any for Mom. I paid for the trip, so I'm ordering you. As my triumphant mother-in-law's face comes into view, everything before me goes dark. What? What does this mean? What am I being told? Since Mom went through all the trouble to prepare, I'll go on the trip just with her. We can go on a different trip together later, Kelly, okay? My husband's rationale, prioritizing his mother as naturally as breathing, leaves me unable to keep up. Or does he think everything will just smooth over if he goes on the trip without me? I've said it time and again, but this is supposed to be our honeymoon. A trip meant for just my husband and me. And now, out of nowhere, his mother shows up expecting to go with us, thinking it's some kind of surprise. Mom went through all the trouble to prepare? I couldn't care less. If anyone should be making concessions, it should be her going home. Yet here I am, being told by my husband to just give up. I'm utterly dumbfounded. I was going to keep quiet, I say, holding my throbbing head and letting out a heavy sigh. But the trip is actually being paid for by my father. You haven't paid a dime, so you have no right to demand my ticket. When I tell him this, it's now my husband's turn to look bewildered. That makes sense. He thought he had paid, which is why he felt so entitled. Why would your father do that? As he starts to sweat, I give him a cold look. He gave us the honeymoon funds to save for our future. And he even told me to keep quiet about it, considering your pride. Why didn't you tell me? My husband yells, his face turning red with the shock. The mother-in-law, who had been smug up until now, probably didn't expect that my father was the one paying. She starts to fidget nervously. Watching my husband's tantrum, I feel my emotions cooling rapidly. All the tolerance for my mother-in-law's snide remarks and my husband's mother-first attitude just drains away. If you two are going, then you'll need to reimburse my father, and I'll cancel the reservations. Go on your trip with your own money. As I shake off my husband and mother-in-law's frantic attempts to stop me, I grab my packed bags and leave the house. This is no joke. There's no way I'm letting my father's money be used for such a selfish mother and son duo. Thanks to them dumping everything on me because they were busy, all the reservations for the flight and hotel were in my name, so I started canceling them as I get into the taxi I had called. Instead of heading to the planned airport, I give the driver my parents' address, and the taxi starts moving, albeit with a hint of confusion. When a daughter supposed to be on her honeymoon returns home with heavy luggage, my father is shocked beyond belief. But when he hears the whole story, he becomes furious. What the hell is that? Are they kidding? The constant calls from my husband only fuel my father's anger further. And of course, my own. After telling my father everything, my resolve solidifies. Dad, I think I want to divorce. I state clearly, and my father calms his anger and quietly supports me. Without saying whether it's good or bad, he just gently rubs my back, his hand warm. I'm sorry, Dad. As tears spill over, I see my father's other hand clenched tightly. The next day, my husband comes to my parents' house to apologize. My father stops me as I try to send him away at the gate. If you're going to divorce, you need to talk it out. I want to hear his side of the story directly. Let him in. Though I had intended to involve a lawyer, I let him in because my father insisted. As my husband realizes my father is at the door, he quickly apologized. Seeing my husband act meekly just because he's in front of my father irritates me. As he continues to act overly apologetic, my father signals me to lead them to the sitting room. I am terribly sorry for causing such a disturbance. Before he can even finish greeting, my husband starts begging. It seems like he talks to my father like that when he's dealing with him in a businesslike manner. Accustomed to it from work, his perfectly executed apology is almost sickening. What are you apologizing for, exactly? My father sighs, not knowing how many times he has done so already. I felt the same way. My husband said he was sorry for causing a disturbance. He wasn't apologizing for what he did to me. That's just insulting. In a rush to say something, my husband started to speak, but I cut him off and handed him a piece of paper. Here's the divorce papers. I've already completed mine. I said this deliberately politely, and his face turned pale as if he hadn't expected the divorce papers to come out at all. Wait,
Kelly, divorce, what are you talking about?
It seemed like the first time he actually looked at me since he came into the house. To him, I'm always second best. It doesn't bother you, right? You have your mother after all. If that's his intention, I might as well speak to him as I would a business associate. I have no intention of repairing our relationship. I must make my feelings clear through my actions.
What are you talking about? Why bring up my mother now? She was looking forward to that trip too. We can go with Kelly anytime, right?
I was appalled. He didn't understand at all why I was angry and left.
Anytime, what are you talking about? It was supposed to be our honeymoon.
I trembled with rage, trying to suppress it with my right hand. My clenched lips hurt.
What kind of husband tries to go on a honeymoon he planned with his wife, with his mother instead?
Speaking out loud made it all the more pathetic. But my husband continued as if to rub salt in the wound.
But I was initially trying to take her with us. It was Kelly who said there were no flights available or that the hotels were booked. Think about it. It's impossible to get anything on the day you tell me.
Unbelievable. He was serious. Amidst my confusion and anger, he was genuinely shouting that it was my fault.
And you're telling my mother to go back? She was looking forward to it so much.
He spat it out with such ferocity it seemed he might physically grab me. My father quietly intervened. Enough. Stop it. Until now, my father had been listening silently and shook his head in dismay.
Tom, I am disappointed in you. No way.
Suddenly calmer, my husband straightened up at those words. My father just looked at him with a sad expression.
Why did you prioritize your mother over Kelly in that situation? Well,
pressed by my father, my husband started to sweat. He could argue back at me, but not at my father.
A honeymoon is meant to be for the couple. You could have traveled with your mother any other time, right? Was your promise to cherish my daughter a lie? It wasn't a lie. I just wanted to value my mother too.
My father glared at him for the first time.
So you don't mind hurting Kelly?
My husband fell silent. I'm sorry. He apologized with a trembling voice. But his clenched hands betrayed his humiliation. He was apologizing because he had to, not because he felt it was necessary. He probably didn't think there was anything wrong with what happened. He was apologizing because he was in trouble with my father, the CEO, nothing more.
Tom, you are competent at your job.
At my father's words, my husband relaxed, thinking he was forgiven, but then realized he was mistaken. But a gaze colder than a midwinter lake pierced through him.
But no matter how capable you are at work, I can't trust someone who doesn't value family.
My father then handed him a pen, and my husband started to shake.
Wait, please! Anything but divorce. I'll change.
My husband wouldn't take the pen, so my father forced it into his hand.
You should be apologizing to someone else, not me.
Now my husband turned to me, begging.
Kelly, say something, please. I'm begging you, not a divorce.
He came to my feet as if fleeing from my father, looking up at me while clinging to my legs.
From now on, I'll prioritize you.
I couldn't even cry anymore. Disdain for me was apparent in every word he said.
Please. If you divorce me, I won't be able to pay off the debt.
Seeing that neither my father nor I were nodding, he shouted as if it slipped out. Debt? What is that? As I looked down at his disheveled head, I repeated the new word I just heard. And my husband jumped away from my feet in shock. He seemed to have blurted it out without thinking.
Well, that.
As my father and I silently demanded he tell everything, my husband finally resigned himself to explain.
Well, actually.
The truth hesitantly revealed by my husband was enough to make both my father and me hold our heads. It turns out, my husband and mother-in-law believed without a doubt that the CEO of the company would fall into their laps, and they had been splurging without regard for money. The reason he went back to his mother's house every week was apparently because they were spending money together.
There's even less reason to keep the marriage now.
My father, utterly contemptuous and speechless, watches as my husband finally shows a genuine act of contrition.
Please wait. If you divorce me, I won't know what to do tomorrow.
His repeated apologizing was almost comical, like a toy I'd seen somewhere.
That's none of our concern.
I send a dry look his way and just wait for him to sign the divorce papers. There's nothing more to talk about, so my father and I quietly sip our coffee. Of course, none for my husband. Though the divorce papers were somewhat coerced, the divorce went through without a hitch. The lawyer my father hired was incredibly capable, and apparently, negotiations went smoothly, partly because I had kept a detailed diary. We even claimed alimony that included the cancelled honeymoon costs, and there was an attempt through lawyers to reduce it. My father told me he had rejected it before I could even respond, and I couldn't help but laugh. As for my ex-husband, he quit his job hurriedly as the divorce became known at the company, making things awkward for him. Leaving on his own meant little severance pay, and with just a small amount of savings left, he struggled to pay the alimony and his debts, forcing him into a much more modest life, I heard from the lawyer. And as for the former mother-in-law, she's bedridden and scraping by with part-time jobs, so desperate that she's been asking old colleagues for money. While it's unclear how true this all is, it now makes for a funny story at gatherings. As for me, I am likely to take over as the next CEO of the company after my father, who has decided to retire, and the other employees have pushed me to step up. Despite my reluctance to be in the forefront, persuaded by my father's rare show of vulnerability, he didn't want to leave the company to someone unreliable. I accepted the responsibility. Though I was initially hesitant, it turns out I may have inherited some business acumen from my father. With his support as chairman, our company's performance has continued to improve. Thanks to gaining more confidence in myself, I've started to receive more invitations to parties where business people gather. I'm not thinking about a new romance just yet, but maybe it's time to take the next step. Despite being married to Sean for 3 years, I can't seem to get pregnant and my anxiety keeps building. I've tried timing it right and have faced 10 consecutive failures. Seeing me down, Natalie coldly says, "Maybe Chris just isn't cut out to be a mom." A month later, I get a phone call. "I'm pregnant with Sean's child." What? Unable to respond, next Sean and his mother speak over the phone.
"I'm going to marry Natalie." A wife who can't even bear children is just dead weight.
Their harsh words tear through my heart.
I understand. I'll prepare the divorce papers.
I'll be staying at Natalie's place for a while. She's got morning sickness, and I need to be there for her. After the call ends, I just stand there, stunned, holding my phone. Before I know it, tears are streaming down my cheeks. In my heart, I swear revenge on Sean and Natalie. They dared to trample on my heart. Don't think this is over. I will bring them down to the depths of despair. My name is Chris, a 42-year-old housewife. I met Sean at work and we got married after 3 years. We worked in the same department after he transferred a few years ago. Gradually, I was drawn to his efficient work and diligent nature. Eventually, Sean asked me out, and we got married the following year. Approaching 40, I told Sean I wanted children soon, and he agreed. Having moved to the city right after high school due to my parents not getting along well, I was determined to build a new family on my own. Everyone around me was having children naturally, so I thought it would be easy for me too. But that was a big mistake. Both Sean and I love children, and every time a colleague announces a pregnancy, I can't help but feel envious. One of my subordinates just had his second boy. He's thrilled, but his wife really wanted a girl. Sean returned from work and, while eating the simmered fish for dinner, he shared his thoughts. I get it. Girls' clothes are so cute, and it'd be fun to have girl talks when she grows up. I fondly remembered a children's clothing catalog a colleague had shown me before. Even though there's a strong trend towards gender neutrality these days, boys' clothes still lean towards blues while girls are often in reds or pinks. The baby models dressed in frills and ribbons looked just like angels. Well, for me, I don't really mind the gender. I lowered my voice in response. Yeah. I stared at the cream of spinach I reached for with my fork. Over these past 2 years, I feel like I've done everything that's said to be good for natural conception. Of course, that includes tracking my menstrual cycle and basal body temperature, and after learning that keeping warm is beneficial, I switched from daily showers to baths. I've also incorporated foods that are good for baby's development like soy, spinach, and liver into our meals. I've heard that zinc is good for reproductive health, so we both take supplements daily. Yet, despite his expressed desire for kids, Sean clearly hasn't been putting in the effort. He declared he would quit smoking, but I caught him sneaking a cigarette during breaks at work, and he refuses homemade lunches, saying a loving wife's lunchbox is just embarrassing whenever I offer because he eats out so much. Eating out too much leads to a lack of vegetables, and that makes it harder to conceive, I tell him, but Sean won't listen. Why? Infertility is a woman's issue, isn't it? I patiently tried to convince him. That's not necessarily true. We should both get checked out at a medical center. They can check everything from the womb and ovaries in women to sperm quality and infections in men. Sean retorted with irritation. Since the woman is the one to give birth, it's a woman's issue. No. Often, the issue could be with the man. That can't be. My mother always said it's the wife's lack of effort. I was so tired of hearing my mother in that context. Once Sean started talking about his mother, I knew he wouldn't listen to anything else. My hunch was right. With a smug look as if it was his own accomplishment, Sean began to chatter away. My mom got pregnant with me just 3 months after getting married. She really wanted a child and prayed every night to my dad and God. Huh? According to Mom, the reason you're not pregnant is because you're not grateful enough to me or God. I almost laughed at that. I understand the eagerness to hold a grandchild with everyone around having one, but I wish she would just leave us alone for a bit. However, it seems like venting to Sean wasn't enough for my mother-in-law. She started driving an hour to our place. She'd show up unannounced on weekends, take over the living room from 5 a.m. until after dinner, and roll with laughter watching TV.
Where's my tea refill? Bring some snacks, can't you? You're not very thoughtful.
When she bosses me around like this, it honestly makes me sick. I've had to cancel plans more than once or twice because I was stuck listening to her chatter. I need your mom to stop these unannounced visits, Sean. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and pleaded with Sean. She bosses me around and criticizes my housekeeping. And the constant pressure about when we're gonna have kids is just too much. Even my heartfelt plea didn't seem to resonate with Sean. He snapped back irritably. My mom is just trying to help you with her advice. You just don't get it.
Your mom's visits are a huge burden. Stress is the worst enemy of trying to conceive.
As I persisted, Sean's expression changed.
You're blaming my mom for our infertility? It's that kind of attitude that's why we don't have kids.
That's terrible, you don't need to say it like that. I couldn't help but tear up, and Sean clicked his tongue and went off to his room. But the next morning, he came to me, looking sorry. I'm sorry about last night. You know, Mom has been living alone since Dad passed away a few years ago. She's just lonely and wants to see her grandchild soon, Sean said softly. In my heart, I muttered. So, you're telling me to just put up with it? I want to complain, but I don't want things to get ugly with Sean, who might someday be the father of my child. With that thought, I always end up holding back what I really want to say. One day, after a while, I met my best friend Natalie at a cafe, and we had a great time chatting. Natalie, who has been my best friend since high school, worked as a web designer for a local company before going independent. She moved to the city around the time I married Sean. She's now contracted with major corporations, including Sean's team, working on important projects. After getting married, I transferred to a different department from Sean's, so I don't know the details, but Natalie is talented and competent, and she's highly regarded by her coworkers. Speaking of which, is your mother-in-law still the same? After the machine gun talk, she asked, and I vented over tea. She's living alone on her pension, so she probably has time to spare, but she drops by on weekends without notice. At least twice a month. Wow, that's a lot. Right? After 2 years, it's just too much. Why don't you just divorce him? Sean always sides with his mom, doesn't he? Natalie said casually, and I just chuckled. I don't like my mother-in-law, but I like Sean. And then I continued. Sean wants a baby too. He says he wants a little girl who looks like Chris, with fair skin and big eyes. Natalie narrowed her eyes slightly. For now, I'm planning to try timing it right and give it 10 consecutive tries. If that doesn't work, maybe I'll visit a specialist. That might be a good idea. You know what? What? I could help mediate. She suggested to my surprised face. You know I lived with my difficult grandmother. Maybe I can talk to your mother-in-law too. I appreciate it, but can I really ask you to do that? Don't be silly. We're close, aren't we, Chris? Natalie's bright smile gave me the push I needed. Then I guess I'll ask for your help. Unlike me, who's shy, she's always been sociable and can make friends with anyone. It might just work out. As we were about to say goodbye outside the cafe, Natalie remembered something. Oh, right. Starting next week, Sean will be working from my place. What? You know, because of the overtime regulations. He'll continue the work that can't be finished at the office at my house. I was definitely taken aback. But, Natalie, you live alone, right? I mean, I trust you, but... Natalie burst out laughing. Oh, come on, Sean's not my type at all. Okay. I muttered, looking down. Natalie assured me firmly. I'm not so desperate that I'd hit on my best friend's husband. Remember the boyfriend I introduced you to? We're still very much in love. Right. I apologized, and Natalie smiled warmly. Relax, it's really just work. Okay. Sorry. The next day, I discreetly asked an acquaintance who works in Sean's department, and it turned out he really did have permission to take work home. If it's true, then it can't be helped. All I can do is trust Natalie and Sean. The following weekend, when my mother-in-law suddenly visited, I messaged Natalie. When I introduced her as my best friend, my mother-in-law initially played nice, but eventually showed her true colors. Chris! Don't make Sean fold laundry. Let him rest on the weekends at least. Then Natalie quickly stepped in. Oh, Chris works full-time too, right? They're in the same boat. But, it's always been decided that housework is a woman's job. Natalie cut off my mother-in-law's faltering words with a smile. These days, husbands who do housework are popular at work too. They are competent and considerate of their wives. That makes them popular from their bosses to their subordinates. Right, Sean? When Natalie turned the conversation to him, Sean looked a bit troubled but intervened on behalf of his mother. Mom, I appreciate how you feel. But I've decided with Chris that we're sharing the household chores. He then began to fold the laundry. In front of his mother, Sean even hates taking away the used dishes, so this was a big step forward. Another time. His mother brought up that Sean's cousin just had their third child and sighed heavily. Chris, are you not having children just to spite me? That's not it. Then Natalie said cheerfully. Mother, you need to relax a bit more or you'll get more wrinkles. The mother-in-law, with eyes wide, heard Natalie continue with an easy smile. It makes sense. Sean is handsome, you are beautiful after all. But if you keep being hard on your daughter-in-law, you'll only get more wrinkles and gray hair. Startled, the mother-in-law touched her face and hair, then fell silent before speaking. Instead of getting angry, her response was unexpected. You're funny. You're much better than gloomy Chris. Really? Thank you. Natalie smiled politely, and Sean, beaming with pride, pulled her close. Natalie is an important business partner of mine. Oh, sounds like work will be productive. After that, my mother-in-law, leaving me out, cheerfully chatted away with Natalie and left in a good mood. Sean excitedly said, "Thank you, Natalie, for keeping my mom entertained. Don't mention it. I'm here to chat anytime you need." Then Sean looked at me with a sarcastic smile. This one always manages to upset Mom. Always does things that get on her nerves. Chris is just a bit clumsy. Sean and Natalie chuckled, and I blushed. Of course, Natalie meant no harm, and I knew I should be thankful since she helped me out. But being mocked by the two of them for trying to close the gap with my mother-in-law left me feeling a bit uneasy. Whether Natalie's approach worked or not, after that, my mother-in-law's visits abruptly stopped. At the same time, Sean's work became even more demanding, and he started spending most weeknights at Natalie's place, working until late. One day, Sean, looking very serious, made a proposal. "I think I'll cut back on alcohol and cigarettes. I want to watch my diet too, so could you make me lunch?" I was surprised by the sudden change of heart, but if he was serious about trying for a baby, it was more than I could hope for. "Of course, leave it to me." After that, I started making lunches for two eagerly. However, even though we tried at the most likely times to conceive, there was no sign of pregnancy. After work, I met with Natalie and tearfully shared the situation. 10 tries and still nothing. "What's going wrong?" Natalie, sipping her herbal tea and crossing her arms, gave a wry smile. "Maybe Chris, you just aren't meant to be a mother?" I stared at her in shock. "Why don't you just give up? It's unfair to Sean." "But, Sean wants kids too. And my mother-in-law. So? Just do what you want." Natalie said irritably and stood up. "I still have work to do. I'm off." "Oh, okay. Sorry for keeping you while you're busy." As I walked home puzzled by Natalie's grumpiness, I told Sean, and he looked exasperated. "Failed again? I've been helping out despite being busy. When are we going to have a child?" It sounded like it was all my fault, and it stung. "Let's just go to a fertility clinic to find out if the issue is with either of us. It seems like natural conception is going to be tough for us." Sean's eyes widened at my words. "No way, that sounds like a hassle. It's definitely your fault anyway. It's a waste of money and time." "Afraid it might be you?" Sean glared at me, but I met his gaze without backing down. "Shut up. I just hate the whole idea." As our arguments increased and the atmosphere grew tense, about a month later. As I finished preparing dinner and waited for Sean's return, I got a call from Natalie. "What's up?" "Oh well, guess what? I'm pregnant." Wait, Natalie is pregnant before me. I was heartbroken, but I forced a cheerful voice. "Congratulations. Is it the boyfriend you mentioned before?" "No, I broke up with him a long time ago." "Oh, I see. So it's someone else." "Yes. It's Sean's baby." I was speechless. "What?" "I said, it's Sean's baby." Natalie repeated firmly, making sure I heard every word. My world went dark. The two people I trusted most were having an affair. Before I could say anything, Sean and his mother shouted through the phone. "It's clear you're not good enough. So, we're getting divorced. I'm going to marry Natalie. A wife who can't have children is just dead weight. I want you out of my sight quickly." Their cruel words tore through my heart. "I understand. I'll prepare the divorce papers. I'll be staying at Natalie's place for a while. She's having morning sickness, and I need to support her. You prepare yourself for the divorce." After saying what he wanted, Sean hung up. I stood there stunned, holding my phone. Tears streamed down my face. Not from sadness, but from sheer frustration. My body shook with anger. I had never been so furious in my life. I bit my lip so hard I almost drew blood and swore in my heart to Sean and Natalie. You dare trample on my heart. Don't think this will just go away. I'll make sure you hit rock bottom. As Sean instructed, I prepared for the divorce and waited a week, but heard nothing. When I called his cell, Natalie answered again. We're at his mother's house right now. Sean doesn't want to go back to you. He doesn't even want to hear your voice. It's funny, considering how lovey-dovey you two were at your wedding 3 years ago. Natalie spoke with dripping sarcasm, but I responded in kind. I don't want to see Sean's face either. But I do want to discuss our future, so I need him to come back just once. If you don't want to see his face, why don't you just leave the house? I'll live here with your mother-in-law and Sean, just the 3 of us. Oh, are you buying it? It's probably about $600,000. It's a 4-bedroom home on a southwest corner lot with a large yard and parking. Huh? I smiled thinly, wondering if she was even listening. Didn't I tell you before? This land was passed down to me from my grandmother. The house was built with an inheritance. Natalie fell silent. She probably thought it was Sean's house. After a pause, she seemed to gather herself and asked, What do you mean by future discussions? Things like shared property. And I need you to sign the divorce papers. Okay, I'll come. When is good for you? I smirked to myself as she took the bait. While holding back laughter, I explained in a matter-of-fact tone. Could you come next weekend? It seemed Sean and his mother, who must have been listening in the background, agreed because Natalie answered. All right. I'll bring Sean and his mother with me. Yes, I'll be waiting. While inwardly frustrated at how well Natalie seemed to fit in with my mother-in-law, I reminded myself to be patient just a little longer and waited for the weekend. 2 weeks later, after making various preparations, Sean, Natalie, and his mother arrived at the appointed time with triumphant smiles. I invited the 3 of them into the living room and asked Sean directly. So, Sean, you plan to marry Natalie after our divorce, right? Yeah. It would be sad if the baby didn't have a father. Sean is really a kind person. Chris, you don't deserve him. His mother said, admiringly puffing up her chest. Kind people don't cheat on their wives with their best friends and then have a child, do they? I wanted to retort, but it seemed pointless to argue properly, so I just muttered it in my heart. But let me say this. While pretending it was just work, it turned into that kind of relationship, huh? As I sighed, Natalie gloated. I swore it when I met you at Chris's wedding. No matter what it took, I was going to take you from her. When we started working together, I felt like fate was on my side. She grinned wickedly and whispered in my ear. Here's something interesting. Chris was dumped by her boyfriends in high school and college because I aggressively pursued them. Natalie's vulgar smile spread across her face as I stared in shock. I bad-mouthed Chris to her boyfriends during our double dates. They quickly fell for me instead. Your boyfriends were just that pathetic, poor thing. Natalie laughed heartily. But well, can't help it. Everyone just falls for me. Yeah, I get it. Natalie, unlike Chris, you're beautiful and funny. No wonder Sean fell hard for you. Sean's mother chimed in, wrapping her arms around Natalie and laughing excitedly. I've really taken a liking to this girl. Ever since we met at Sean's house, I've visited her home several times. We had a great time talking about Chris's old stories. Like when Chris was ostracized in her club activities or sat alone eating her lunch because she couldn't fit in with the girls. Sean too spread a sleazy grin. Chris's imitation of crying was the best. Really, Natalie, you're so funny. Chris, at least you have an eye for friends. I clenched my fist as the 3 of them laughed uproariously. They were enjoying making fun of me. What a dream to think this wonderful woman is carrying Sean's child. I can't wait for the baby. Sean's mother gazed at Natalie's not yet swollen belly, her cheeks flushing. Keep going at this rate and have 4 or 5. I'll support you. his mother declared boldly, and I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Sean and his mother looked puzzled as I shook with laughter and made my excuses. Oh, sorry. I couldn't hold it in.
What? If you have something to say it.
Yeah, that's rude. Not that it's anything new. The two of them looked annoyed, and I told them with a smile. Then I'll say it. That child is not Sean's. Natalie tried to appear calm. But I didn't miss the moment her face twitched. What?
Stop it, you're just jealous of Natalie.
Faced with their skepticism, I decided to show them the proof. I laid out the documents sent from the hospital on the table. Sean looked annoyed, his mother frowned, and Natalie appeared uneasy as they all leaned in to look at the papers. Sperm count, 0. It's called azoospermia. Sean has male infertility. So even if Natalie had a relationship with him, it wouldn't result in a child. Confused and unable to grasp the situation, his mother and a shocked Sean listened as I broke it down for them. Remember, Sean grudgingly agreed to order a pregnancy test kit. 3 days ago, your results came addressed to you, but I accidentally opened it. And this is what it said. I placed my own test results next to it for clarity. All my values were high, well above the standard levels. That meant I wasn't the cause of our infertility. His mother, who had been staring at the paper as if to bore holes into it, turned away with a face like she had bitten into a sour apple. Unable to say a mean word to me. I thought she might burst, and she eventually blushed and shouted. This is a lie. Chris must have fabricated these to malign us. Right, Sean? But Sean just grimaced and looked down. If that's true, then who's the father of the baby? I'd like to know that too. Ah, but maybe you don't even know yourself? As I fiddled with my phone and showed everyone a picture I had pulled up, Natalie's face twisted into a demonic grimace. Where did you get this? She leaned forward as if she was about to grab me by the collar. I smirked and told her. I have other friends too. Are these all the potential dads, I wonder? Are they all potential dads? His mother screamed almost like a wail. Sean was speechless. And for good reason. Images showed Natalie arm in arm with various men, entering and exiting hotels. 6 different men in total. I told a coworker when I heard Sean was working at Natalie's place. Then I was warned that woman seduces married men from client companies one after another, so be careful. She always targeted men from other companies so Sean wouldn't find out. I confronted her while looking directly at Natalie. I thought you wouldn't go after a best friend's husband, at least. I trusted you, and you betrayed me so easily. Natalie started to say something but then closed her mouth and stayed silent. Feeling pathetic for having been friends with such a person for so long. When I glanced at Sean, his face was a mix of anger and disappointment.
Honestly, I don't care who the father is.
After some time passed, Natalie finally became defiant. She clung to Sean and spoke in a sugary tone. I chose Sean. He's the fastest rising star in his department, straight on the elite track. And I get along with your mother so much better than Chris ever did. I'm absolutely better for Sean than Chris. Natalie. Sean frowned. Then, his mother, with a forced smile, spoke to Natalie. Natalie, you're that trendy something designer, right? Yes, I'm a freelance web designer. I earn a lot, even though it might not look like it. Oh, do you dislike working women? Not at all. Nowadays, it's normal for daughters-in-law to work, right? I understand that much. She extended her hand to Natalie while still smiling. I much prefer you over Chris. Please become part of our family. Really?
Oh, I'm so happy. Thank you.
While Sean was left aside, the 2 women clasped hands and cheered. Hey, Mom. Are you okay with the grandchild not being mine? His mother cheerfully declared. Totally fine. We can't expect any from you in the future anyway, right? If so, I'd rather have a daughter-in-law I get along with and enjoy life. We've got to think about our livelihood too. The remark from his mother made everything click for me. I turned back to Natalie and offered my congratulations. That's great for you, Natalie. You always said you wanted to marry a successful businessman and have kids soon. Oh, you've moved on already? Simple-mindedness suits you well. Well, thanks anyway. While his mother was in a good mood and Sean furrowed his brow, I continued. It's going to be tough going forward, but good luck. As a former best friend, I support you. Come on, Sean, sign the divorce papers. After Sean finished signing the divorce papers, Natalie suddenly remembered something. By the way, we haven't discussed our shared assets yet. Oh. It's easier if I just show you. I opened a family sharing app on my phone and showed Natalie, who turned pale the moment she saw it.
What is this?
She was shocked by the exchange she saw on the screen. Sean, I lost $2,000 again today. Give me some allowance. Again? That's the third time this month, right? I'm already paying off your gambling debts, try to cut back a little. Don't be stingy. You make plenty of money, you should give some to your mother. Another day. If we start fertility treatments in earnest, I won't be able to hand over money like I used to. Going forward, please limit your spending to your pension and dad's savings. What? No way. It's a child's duty to support their parents. You can do fertility treatments if you want, but keep giving me money as usual. I expect about $10,000 a month, okay? I explained to a stunned Natalie. They accidentally sent this personal exchange in a group message. I was shocked when I saw it. No wonder Sean was reluctant about fertility treatments. I took a deep breath and glared at his mother.
After rushing to have children, you have the audacity to ask your child for gambling money. What a mother. You're annoying. It's none of your business. Right, it's no longer my business. So good luck, Natalie.
I patted a dazed Natalie on the shoulder. You get along so well with your mother-in-law, you'll probably end up being milked for money. Do your best. But, the debt is part of the marital assets, right? Natalie looked at me, her voice trembling with fear. I've taken steps to renounce the debt. Oh, and since Sean dipped into our savings too, he'll be repaying that along with the alimony. I stated sharply, and Natalie's forehead vein popped in anger. She stood up quickly, raising her voice angrily.
What? You must be joking. I chose him because I thought I could live luxuriously. Why should I have to deal with his mother's debts?
Natalie. Sean said, wide-eyed, as Natalie glared at him furiously.
That's it, I'll raise the child by myself. You just keep cozying up to your mama as usual.
With that, Natalie stormed out, slamming the door behind her. His mother, who had been staring blankly at the doorway, puffed her cheeks.
What the heck? Such a rude girl,
she exclaimed. By her side, Sean fidgeted and then suddenly bowed deeply to me. I'm sorry, Chris. It was all my fault. She came on strong, and I got carried away. I've realized now that I truly only love you. His mother quickly added her own apology. Yes, that's right. We were deceived. I never thought she was that kind of person. So please reconsider the divorce. She laughed nervously and wrung her hands. I even finished the procedures to sell the house. We were supposed to move into Natalie's place tomorrow, so this sudden change is really inconvenient. Mom, selling the family home is news to me. Wait, did you lose at the races again? Or was it another impulsive buy? Sean asked, turning pale. His mother blushed and lifted her new purse to show off. Look, it's the latest bag. Pretty, isn't it? Sean covered his face and groaned. Not again? Give me a break. She thought your house was too run down, wanted to move to something nicer. If Natalie's place is no good, maybe a high-rise or something. This place is pretty nice, too. she said arrogantly, scanning the room. Chris is kind, she won't abandon us. Let's forget what happened and stay together. His mother said brazenly. Rage boiled up from deep within me.
Don't joke around. You're the ones who wanted a divorce. Sean, make sure you move your stuff by this weekend. Otherwise, I'm throwing it all out.
I'm apologizing here. Can't you compromise a little? You're so cold. Let's handle the rest through our lawyers. I'm done here, you can go now. I hurried Sean and his displeased mother out of the house. Natalie and Sean's careers had seemed promising, but after the wives of the men Natalie had involved herself with complained to their superiors, the project was cancelled. Natalie was fired, ending her association with our company. After paying alimony to me and the other wives from her savings, Natalie tried to find a job as if nothing had happened. However, her bad reputation had spread throughout the industry, and she was unable to find employment anywhere. She couldn't pay her condo mortgage anymore and had to move to an old apartment. After giving birth, she placed her baby in daycare and struggled to make ends meet by working multiple part-time jobs. Sean, too, found it uncomfortable to stay at his job after his affair was exposed and quit. To pay for his mother's shopping habits, he reluctantly sold their family home and moved with her into a shabby apartment. After changing jobs to a smaller company, Sean depleted his savings compensating me for our joint savings and paying alimony, making his life even harder. His mother didn't help around the house and indulged in gambling instead. Constant fights between mother and son led their landlord to threaten eviction due to noise complaints. Freed from the obsession of having to have children quickly, I felt lighter. I returned to full-time work and threw myself more into my job than ever before. The following year, I was promoted to supervisor. Eventually, a younger colleague proposed, and after dating, we got married. Soon after, I became pregnant and was blessed with a lovely daughter. My in-laws were wonderful people, and now I have a warm and loving family. Through interactions with my adorable child, my in-laws, and my husband, I cherish my daily happiness. Roy, could you hold the baby for me? Wow, really? Do you think I can do it? Nervously requested by my sister, my husband carefully picked up the baby. Today we were celebrating the birth of my sister's child. Many relatives brought gifts for the baby, joining us to celebrate the occasion. Holding the baby, my husband was seemingly moved by its smallness and cuteness, and he couldn't help but express it. Oh, she's really adorable. I wish I could have one of my own soon. Saying so, he looked at me with a weary smile and murmured. Quick as a whip, I teased him. What are you talking about, Roy? You're always so good at cracking jokes. Your own child is right in front of you. At my words, everyone at the event fell silent.
What are you saying? You must be joking too.
Seeing my husband flustered, I pressed on. The mood quickly soured, but when I revealed the truth, it was clear that everyone was stunned. My name is Kristen. After graduating from college, I worked as an office clerk at a typical company. As I got used to the job, I was invited to a mixer organized by a coworker, where I met the man who would become my husband, Roy. He was a year older than me and apparently worked in the general affairs department of a major company nearby. Roy and I shared a hobby of traveling abroad, and we hit it off discussing the countries we had visited, exchanging contact information quickly. Afterward, Roy frequently asked me out for meals, and our relationship naturally began. A few years later, he proposed, and we got married. At my husband's request, I quit my job upon marrying to devote myself to being a full-time homemaker. Around this time, Roy was transferred to the always busy sales department, as rumored. Though expected, he began working overtime daily, coming home late, and was often called in by his boss even on weekends. Neither of us said it, but we resigned ourselves to this as it was his job. The time we used to spend traveling together on weekends was no longer available, and 3 years into our marriage, we were still not blessed with children. By the way, I have a half-sister. Her name is Holly. My parents divorced when I was still in elementary school. The usual differences in values were the reason. My mother had graduated from a prestigious university and worked in a prime department of a large corporation. She earned well and wanted to continue working after marriage, but my father staunchly refused. With a typical classic value, he believed it was natural for women to stay home, support their husbands, and raise children. After my birth, my mother complied with my father's demands, but as I grew and became less dependent, she wished to return to work. Naturally, my father was vehemently opposed. Neither yielded, and eventually, they divorced, with my father taking custody of me. A few years later, when I was in middle school, my dad remarried. My stepmother's name was Emily, and she was a waitress at a club my father frequented. She wasn't bad-looking but had a somewhat cold demeanor and didn't make much effort to connect with me. A year after their marriage, my sister Holly was born. My father and Emily were thrilled, spoiling Holly at every opportunity. Whenever Holly was in a bad mood and wouldn't stop crying, they'd buy her the toy she wanted or let her skip school to go to the amusement park if she asked. On the other hand, they wouldn't even pay for my high school tuition, telling me to figure it out yourself. I worked part-time every day to afford my tuition. Moreover, Emily would make lavish, homemade meals for Holly every day but told me, "You're not family," deliberately giving me leftovers or plain meals. Enduring such harsh treatment was only possible because of the occasional visits with my biological mother. Since my father had custody, I couldn't live with my mother, but I was allowed to see her, and that was my salvation. Returning to my story, 3 years after I married, to my surprise, it was Holly who had a child first. Her partner was a college classmate she had been dating. They decided to have what you'd call a shotgun wedding. When I heard this news, I felt quite frustrated internally and couldn't genuinely celebrate the announcement. However, Holly is still my half-sister, and we share the same blood. When Holly and her classmate came to our house to announce it, I congratulated her. "Holly, I was surprised when I heard, but congratulations on your marriage and pregnancy. Your partner seems like a very kind person, I'm relieved. Morning sickness and the like might be tough, but if there's anything I can do, just call me anytime." I offered these caring words with a smile from the bottom of my heart. But Holly didn't thank me, she just smirked at me. "Holly, what's wrong?" "Sis, how old are you this year?" "I'm turning 34, but why do you ask?" "Because, sis, it's just too sad. You're such an old lady and still don't have even one child. How does it feel to be overtaken by your much younger and cuter sister?" Holly's mocking laugh made my head go blank and my mouth hung open. "Oh, I guess I don't need to ask. You're looking so frustrated and pitiful right now. Not being able to have kids must feel like you're finished as a woman. Well, I'm going ahead of you." Hearing Holly's words, my father, Emily, and even Holly's partner chuckled. "Indeed. It's strange that you haven't had a child after 3 years of marriage. Is there something wrong? Maybe. You should probably hurry to the hospital." "Excuse me, I have to leave." I couldn't bear to stay any longer and quickly left the room. Rushing home, the moment I was alone, tears streamed down my face. Not being able to have children was something I had always been sensitive about. I never imagined it would be exposed in front of everyone like this. That night, unusually, my husband Roy came home before midnight, and I decided to talk to him. Lately, it had become normal for Roy to come home in the morning, returning home just for a bath and a change of clothes. He mostly ate out, and we no longer ate together at home. Today, I went home to congratulate Holly on her pregnancy, and guess what she said? She said I'm finished as a woman. It was really the worst thing someone said. I regret going there. I hoped my husband would offer some comforting words. However, the response I received was an unexpected blow. "I think Holly has a point." "What?" "Just because only women can have babies, it's like the happiness of a woman has always been linked to childbirth. So, you're just jealous of Holly for getting pregnant, right?" Roy seemed to think this was self-evident, stating it matter-of-factly.
Wait, Roy, do you really think that? Is it because you think there's something wrong with me that I can't get pregnant?
I confronted my husband emotionally. It's not just my fault that we can't have kids. Mostly, it's because you're always coming home in the morning, so we don't get enough time together, right?
What? You're making it sound like it's my fault. The late nights are a recent thing. You know better than anyone that I used to come home earlier when we first got married. We had our time together. And yet, we still didn't have kids, so it must be your fault.
Roy defensively implied that the fault was entirely mine, completely absolving himself.
In the end, Holly is just better at being a woman than you are.
Shocked by his words, I stopped speaking to him for a while. Feeling the tension, Roy began to spend even less time at home, and the gap between us grew deeper. Several months later, Holly safely delivered a baby girl. Holly's health improved considerably, and a baby shower that had been planned for a while was set to take place. My parents, relatives, and Roy's parents all brought gifts and attended. Holly's baby was so adorable that everyone present was utterly charmed. "Roy, could you hold the baby for me?" "Wow, really? Do you think I can do it?" Nervously requested by Holly, Roy hesitantly picked up the baby. Moved by its smallness and cuteness, he couldn't help but express it.
"Oh, she's really adorable. I wish I could have one of my own soon."
Saying so, he looked at me with a weary smile and murmured,
"What are you talking about, Roy? You're always so good at cracking jokes. You're holding your own child right now."
At my words, everyone at the event fell silent. What are you saying? There's no way this child could be mine." Seeing my husband flustered, I pressed on. "What if I told you, this child is the result of an affair between my husband and my sister? Did you all really not know? I have solid proof." The statement that I had proof made everyone freeze on the spot.
"Cut it out. This is absurd. You're saying that Holly and I had an affair? That's impossible." "Yeah, sis. Roy's right, that's impossible. And what proof are you talking about? You're just making this up because you're jealous I had a child before you."
Roy and Holly frantically denied the affair, but their desperation made them seem even more suspicious, and the relatives began to murmur. The atmosphere turned from joyful to tense, and I slammed the supposed proof onto the table. I had been suspicious of Roy's late returns and frequent early mornings, so I hired a detective to track him. The results were as black as I feared. The photos from the detective clearly showed Roy and, shockingly, Holly entering and leaving a hotel together. According to the detective, their affair had been going on for 2 years, and Roy was still lying about work to meet Holly. Seeing the photos, everyone's face turned pale. Roy and Holly, apparently not expecting that I had actual proof of their affair, were speechless, their mouths agape. Then, a relative spoke up.
"How could you do something so outrageous? Do you understand what this means?"
"What do you mean? Why are you so upset?"
"Obviously, because your ridiculous affair is messing up our lives."
Filled with anger, a relative confronted Roy, who began to look fearful as he sensed the seriousness of the situation. Looking around, he saw that most of the relatives were glaring at him and Holly, who seemed to have noticed this as well and was slightly trembling. It was understandable for the relatives to be furious. In fact, soon after my mother divorced, she quit her job and started her own business. Being passionate about her work, she quickly grew her company into a major corporation that represented our local area. Now handling a broad range of businesses, my mother's company had dealings with nearly all local companies. Because of this, many relatives had received work or financial assistance from my mother's company and benefited in some way. Thus, Roy and Holly making an enemy of me. That meant incurring the wrath of the CEO, my mother. Most of our relatives lived relatively prosperous lives thanks to my mother's success. Roy and Holly's affair threatened to disrupt their comfortable lifestyles, so naturally, they couldn't overlook what the two had done. Amidst relatives worrying about their own futures, Holly's in-laws were quietly furious. Reaching their limit, despite the murmuring of the relatives, Holly's father-in-law suddenly shouted, "Were you deceiving us all along? You shameless woman!" Even Holly flinched under the fierce gaze of her in-laws. "I didn't mean to deceive anyone." Holly started making excuses and showing tears, but her in-laws were still visibly angry and continued to berate her. Holly's father-in-law was a key executive at a major company run by my father-in-law. Upon discovering Holly's deception, he began talking about reconsidering their future business relations. Hearing this, Holly's in-laws panicked. They apologized, trying to earn forgiveness. They even forced Roy to prostrate himself. Roy, pale-faced and trembling, apologized while bowing deeply, "I am terribly sorry." Despite the entire family bowing, Holly's in-laws were still not satisfied. Then, previously silent, Holly suddenly spoke up. "Well, it's all come out even though I've been hiding it. But it can't be helped. Sis, you don't mind if I take Roy, do you?" With a smile, Holly hugged Roy's arm. "Right? Roy would be happier with a younger and cuter wife like me at home instead of an old lady like you, right?" "Maybe, but..." Roy responded in a sweet voice, not clearly rejecting her but also not committing. Which seemed to annoy the stepmother, who quickly jumped in to support Holly. "That's right. Holly has a point. How could you hesitate to have such a cute and wonderful girl as your wife? She's perfect, already has a child, and she loves you. What's wrong with being with someone you love?" The stepmother made excuses to defend Holly. "How funny. Classic Emily. Blood really is thicker, huh? Even the tendency to easily have an affair runs in the family." "What did you just say?" I quickly showed a photo. It depicted the stepmother meeting a young man at a bar, hidden from my father. In the photo, the stepmother was smiling at the man in a way she had never shown my father, even holding the young man's hand. "What's this? Where did you secretly take this?" Wondering if she was caught, Emily suddenly tried to destroy the evidence by snatching the photo from my hands. "It's fine, you can have that one. I've got plenty more where that came from." I pulled a thick brown envelope from my bag, took out other incriminating photos, and scattered them on the spot. The photos of Emily's infidelity fluttered to the floor. Dad picked up one from the floor, his hands trembling, and then crumpled the photo and threw it at Emily. "Who is this man?" "It was just a coincidence. I was at a bar with a friend and he happened to be sitting next to us." "You just happened to go to a hotel with a man you meet by chance?" Dad picked up another photo, glaring at Emily. In that photo, Emily was seen leaving a hotel, arm in arm and looking happy, with the man from the previous photo. Emily, realizing her excuses were futile, sighed deeply and shut her mouth. "Your silence means you admit to the affair, doesn't it? How long have you been deceiving me?" "How long? I forgot when it started. If you never noticed my affairs over the years, it just shows you weren't interested in me." "What did you say?" Dad, enraged by her defiant attitude. "I've been working hard for the sake of our family all these years, and this is how you repay me." "Fine, I understand. We're getting divorced today." The word divorce drained the color from Emily's face. She probably thought Dad would never actually bring up divorce, no matter her infidelities. "Wait, just wait a minute, it was just an affair. It wasn't serious, so why does it have to lead to divorce? Why don't we sit down and think it over? If it wasn't serious, why have you continued to cheat all these years? You just said yourself, what's wrong with being with someone you love? I'm offering you a divorce, go ahead and be with your lover." Emily was speechless at Dad's response. Meanwhile, Holly was still pressing Roy to marry her, seemingly oblivious to the uproar about the divorce. Seemingly reaching his limit with her indecision, he suddenly pulled his arm away. "Roy, you're too indecisive. I've even had your child. Just make up your mind and marry me now." "Holly, that hurts. Don't pull on me like that." All right. I'll divorce Kristen and marry you, Holly. So please, don't be mad, okay? It seemed Roy and Holly had made their decision. While my parents were causing a scene, the two were trying to sneak out of the house. I wasn't about to let them leave without a word. Where do you two think you're going? You were just talking about divorcing me. Are you off to the city hall to get the divorce papers? I approached them with a mocking smile. Well, I couldn't be happier to get rid of such a husband. But what will you do now? Holly just had a baby and can't work, and by the way, Roy, isn't your company in quite a bit of trouble? I'm really concerned. The two stopped in their tracks at the door as they heard my words.
Stop saying ridiculous things about my company.
I'm not joking around. I know how much you make every month. Since our marriage, not only received no raise, but you've also missed out on bonuses. In fact, Roy's company had been struggling for years, and rumors of bankruptcy were circulating in the industry. As the salary suggested, it was likely true, and it was only a matter of time before Roy was laid off. Is what my sister saying true? Holly suddenly let go of Roy's arm, her face contorting. Roy couldn't meet her eyes, knowing too well about the bankruptcy rumors, and simply nodded. Really? So all the promises about buying me designer goods and taking me on lots of trips abroad were all lies? No, it's not that they were lies, but right now, things are just a bit tight. Faced with the harsh reality that she couldn't indulge in luxuries anymore, Holly burst into loud tears, suddenly not wanting to believe it and lashing out at Roy. Roy, not knowing what else to do, simply kept apologizing. Thus, the baby shower ended in chaos. A few weeks later, my divorce with Roy was finalized. And I successfully secured a substantial alimony. It later emerged that the child Holly had given birth to was neither Roy's nor her college classmates. It turned out the baby's blood type didn't match Roy's, prompting a DNA test that revealed the child was fathered by a completely different man. Apparently, Holly had been having affairs with multiple men, aiming to marry a classmate who appeared wealthy. As for Roy, she had approached him thinking his salary was good and merely used him for extra cash. Unsurprisingly, Holly ended up being sued for a significant amount of alimony by the classmate's family. Around the same time as our divorce, my father also finalized his divorce from Emily, kicking both her and Holly out of the house. While it was good to evict them, my father, who was completely inept at household chores, seemed quite lost living alone for the first time and would occasionally email me asking for housekeeping tips. As for Emily and Holly, they actually had the nerve to show up at my apartment asking for money to help with living expenses. Naturally, I turned them away with a "you're not family." That seemed to have hit them hard, as I haven't heard from them since. Following our divorce, as rumors had predicted, Roy's company went bankrupt. Despite frequenting job centers, his pride kept him from settling into a steady job, and his willingness to work gradually waned. Eventually, I heard through the grapevine that he had ended up living under a bridge along the riverbank. It was a shock to discover my ex-husband had become homeless, but it was a consequence of his own actions. As for me, my mother had previously invited me to work at her company, so post-divorce, I secured a job there without much difficulty. The compensation is quite good, and unlike my husband, I don't have to worry about living expenses. I can focus on office work at my mother's place, which makes it an ideal environment where I feel quite secure about my job. Adding to my happiness, I started dating a man I met at work and soon after received a marriage proposal. We got married. And shortly thereafter, I discovered I was pregnant. Our company is very supportive of women's maternity needs and reintegration into the workforce, so I can focus on parenting without any worries. Now, I am grateful to my mother and am fully committed to raising my child day by day.